Hello and welcome to Americans Learn, not Chicago Reacts, but I have been having some weird audio issues with the Learns segment, like with that background with the mic. I don't know exactly what's going on. Hopefully I'll be able to fix it soon, but for now I want to have better audio happening. So it's not just in like one person's ear, especially because like the last video I did, I know there was some issues with that, but I also did a bunch of edits and stuff in that video. So it's like I spent a lot of time on it and I feel like people aren't going to watch it. So I'm doing it on this background with this settings because I know that this one is working. I know this one works. So Americans Learns, not Chicago Reacts. Hello. You should also come visit us over there at some point, but this is for Learns. The video we're doing today is from Overly Sarcastic Productions. It is about failed assassinations. Because, you know, I feel like this video might be 4 years old, but it's kind of appropriate for right now, considering some of the things that have just occurred. I will not be making any kind of comment other than that about it. But let's look at some other failed assassinations throughout history. Just for fun.
Diplomacy is complicated. You have to manage competing interests and work cooperatively to ensure the best communal outcome. But luckily, there is another, much more efficient option. Murder. Because once you leap over those pesky little speed bumps like the worth of human life, it becomes so much easier to solve your problems by just unexisting the people who disagree with you. You know, like a psychopath. But despite the nominal simplicity of huck a javelin through his abdomen, killing people can be surprisingly labor-intensive and prone to mistakes, especially when the target is some political bigwig.
I wonder if we're going to talk about Rasputin. I mean, eventually they definitely assassinated him, but they failed a couple of times first. Let's see, I'm trying to think if I could think of who they might choose. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe Rasputin. I'm thinking maybe Teddy Roosevelt. I feel like there's somebody else who I know, but I can't quite put my finger on him.
So, to have a laugh at the expense of some of the most notorious failed assassins, let's do some history. Our first story takes us to the eastern edge of the Mediterranean at the tail end of the Roman Republic, which was perilous for everybody involved. If you weren't Roman, you were always in danger of being conquered, and if you were Roman, then it's likely you were in the middle of an active civil war.
Great!
In such a politically hazardous climate, everybody was under threat of sabotage, and in 120 BC, King Mithradates of Pontus was poisoned by none other than his wife.
Ouch! My bones! My bones!
Needless to say, the royal kiddos were spooked by the proposition of an arsenic sippy cup, so one of the princes booked it for the woods. While he was wandering around the Pontic wilderness building support for a coup, the prince decided to be proactive about the inevitable threat of poison. So whenever he stumbled across one of Anatolia's many poison-filled plants, animals, or minerals,
this prince was clearly a big fan of Kirby games.
He just ate it. The logic being that if he ingested all of the poisons imaginable in small doses, he could build up an immunity to it and become invincible. So after 7 long years in
Sure. Oh, Hitler will be on there, I'm sure. I was like, some German. Oh my God. I literally was thinking some German guy for sure was almost assassinated. Freaking Hitler. Forgot. Oh my God. That wasn't who I was thinking of. I think I was trying to think of like one of the Ludwigs or something who are more Austrian, but still, like, that's kind of funny. It was in fact, some German guy. Anyway, I feel like Napoleon, maybe? He was French, I understand, but I'm like, so I was thinking about somebody who actually did something like this, where they like tried to build up an immunity to poisons. I mean, Wesley in The Princess Bride did it, but like, did Napoleon try this very thing? Like, ingesting little bits of poison kind of consistently and get to a point where, he just couldn't, like, that was the goal, was not to be killed by it. I will tell you that it worked in the show Spy Family. Yor and her brother, Yuri, both of them have eaten so much poison, they're both immune to poison.
In the woods getting blasted on tree frogs and vipers, the prince returned to his capital of Sinope and cooed his way to becoming King Mithridates VI. With crown on head and kingdom in hand, Mithridates set about doing 2 things: expanding his state to prepare against the Roman threat, and doing way the hell more poison. And now that the king had graduated from his days of just eating stuff and seeing what happens, he was going to use his royal resources to be scientific about this. He built a series of poison labs to source more elaborate ingredients, test new concoctions on prisoners, develop tailored antidotes, and of course, get more poison to snack on.
I mean, honestly though, sucks that he's doing it on prisoners or whatever, human rights violations. Yes, it happened thousands of years ago. But, like, sounds very scientific, you know? It's like, and also, this might be the reason that we have certain antidotes for certain poisons, because he was making sure that we had them.
No, His Highness the King does not have a poison addiction. He can stop anytime he wants. But why stop when he had baller party tricks like gulping down snake venom? Now the thing is, part of me feels bad for memeing so hard on Mithradates because he was an extremely learned king who collected massive libraries, could speak well over a dozen languages, and grew his small kingdom into a Black Sea empire. But on the other hand, funny haha poison man, so my hands are tied. Mithridates likely survived several assassination attempts, but we'll never really know how many because none of them worked. Of course, like everybody else in the ancient Mediterranean, his downfall was Rome. His grand strategy was to incite a revolt in western Anatolia and Greece to let disgruntled Romans do what they do best. The confusion of mass slaughter made great cover for Mithridates' march into Roman territory, and he managed to get in a spirited back and forth for a good 2 decades before Rome stopped compulsively slapping itself in the face and actually started trying. Eventually, General Pompey, soon to be Pompey the Great, later to be Pompey the Headless, stomped the Pontic army and forced Mithridates to flee across the Black Sea to Crimea. After failing to raise another army, he decided it was better to just die than to get paraded in a Roman triumph. So with his back against the wall, Mithridates killed himself by poison. Except he did not, because he was immune. Plan B was asking a friend of his to do him a solid and just stab him. It's lucky he didn't supplement his daily poison regimen with doses of tiny knives, or else he really would have been screwed. And so
he would have had to have a lot then. It's so funny. He's like, I'm going to make myself immune to poison so no one can assassinate me. And then it's like, time to assassinate myself. Guess I'll drink poison. Wait a minute. I may have miscalculated slightly.
Oh, King Mithridates died as he lived. Not dying from poison. Now, trying to kill one king is enough of an endeavor, but as time goes on, administrations evolve and power often gets distributed to a much wider base. This makes it infinitely more difficult to off an entire government at once. But luckily, the 1600s are a wonderful time full of such modern marvels as high explosives, and some enterprising lads wanted to make use of this new tech. So, let's set the scene. England has been ruled by Protestants for nearly a century, and they were making life increasingly suckish for the English Catholic holdouts. And since England's Anglican monarchs kept butting heads with very Catholic Spain and getting excommunicated by the very Catholic Pope, adherence to the Church in Rome was treated on par with being an enemy of the state. This was an extremely complex mesh of religious and political factors that would require a delicate touch to overcome. Or, blow up Parliament. No fuss, no persuasion checks, just an ass ton of explosives. That was the logic of these fine morons. Robert Catesby, Guy Fawkes, and—
Oh my god, his name was Guido? Guido Fawkes? What? I've never heard that. I've heard Guy Fawkes a million times, because, 5th of November, blah, blah, blah. V for Vendetta, yes, let's go.
And 10 other Catholics conspiring to destroy the Protestant government of England under the new King James I. The scariest part of the story is that the plan might have worked if the conspirators shared more than 5 brain cells between them. For instance, step 1 was renting an apartment next to the Palace of Westminster under the bulletproof alias of John Johnson, which must have made the landlord think, ah yes, Mr. John Johnson, he must have a respectable career of doing job at place. Then spent weeks hauling 36 full barrels of gunpowder into the apartment in advance of Parliament's reopening. But boomifying an entire government body was only part of the scheme, as they planned to start a revolt in the countryside and capture the king's Catholic daughter to install her as a puppet queen. And lastly, they'd sail over to Europe to get the Pope to support the new Catholic government and pretty please forgive us for all of the murder. So that was the idea, but Parliament was closed for most of the year because of plague, mood, and wouldn't reopen until November 5th. That left a lot of time for the conspirators to ruminate on—
because this came out 4 years ago, so guess what was happening in 2020?
on the moral implications of terrorism. Not because murder was wrong or anything silly like that, but because they had some friends in Parliament. So despite strict orders not to send any warnings to anybody, one of the conspirators sent a "hey, maybe don't go to Parliament" note to his buddy. Now this alarm bell wrapped in a red flag had the easily foreseeable consequence of getting reported straight to the Chamberlain, who proceeded to search the entirety of Parliament on the night before the plot. Imagine their surprise to find a lone gentleman standing next to a pile of firewood and 36 barrels of gunpowder in an otherwise empty apartment. apartment, a gentleman who insists that his name is John Johnson, esteemed doer of job at place. I'm sure Guy Fawkes was shocked the constable saw through his ironclad disguise. Fawkes was subsequently tortured into giving up the names of his co-conspirators who were busy up in the countryside.
They really didn't try to make him look ugly or anything, though. Like, if that's really what he looked like, I mean, honestly, they were very flattering to pretty much every single person in this picture, now that I'm thinking about it. They all look pretty good.
Failing to start their revolt. Unfortunately, their excess storage of gunpowder had gotten soaked, so these big brain boys laid it out to dry in front of a fire, which is just the most apt visual metaphor for a plant blowing up in your face. The crew was captured and executed, and for the next century and change, British Catholics were treated even harsher because of their association with the gunpowder plot, even losing the right to vote until 1829.
Wow.
Nice job ending that religious persecution. Good.
And yet the only name we know is Guy Fawkes from that. I feel like I've heard of Thomas Percy, but I just might have heard of Percy's, like, in general, like the Percy family, from reading Philippa Gregory books when I was a kid. But, like, Guy Fawkes is the only one that they blow up every year.
Good work, team. Now, I was originally going to wrap this video with a story of either Rasputin or Fidel Castro, but Rasputin did end up getting shot to death, so he's disqualified, and the only thing more numerous than the CIA's 600 assassination attempts on Castro is the amount of low-effort listicles about it. Instead, we're gonna ignore the rest of the world and cozy up in Venice. So, the Venetian Republic, the longest-lasting and best government in world history, I need not say more. But sometimes, rarely, the Serenissima made some tactical errors. In 1310, Venice had ruffled enough Vatican feathers to earn themselves an interdict in which the Pope smacks the Holy Banhammer onto an entire city. This was bad news for a mercantile island republic with approximately 4 square feet of arable land. As the man in charge of this mess, Doge Gradenigo was immensely disliked and had to take draconian steps to quell all the unrest. In a dicey situation like this, Venetian nobles had the option to A, deal with it, or B, riot. So with the Great British Boom House still a couple centuries off, how did this conspiracy go down? Well, it started with a handful of snippy nobles and one Baiamonte Tiepolo, the grandson of a former doge and a man with no qualms about hucking the Republic off a bridge and installing.
The Doge of Venice always wears this corno hat, making this chibi roughly accurate to all 120 doges.
Himself as despot. These gents were all but certain that scores of Venetian nobles and commoners alike would join in their quest to stab the doge in the face, so they sent out a lot of feelers to their friends around town. But coup is a strong word, and some people were distinctly not on board and did the responsible thing of reporting the conspiracy right to the doge. But even if the conspirators knew to expect a veritable party bus of guards, their more pressing concern was weather, namely the springtime lightning storms. See, their foolproof plan was to take 2 groups across town and raise the citizens to arms before meeting in St. Mark's Square.
Just like, I mean, I've always lived in places that have like really unpredictable weather. So the idea of like, yes, it's time for the spring lightning storms. It's like, oh, that's a thing you can just know what it's going to happen. I know like lots of places have like the rainy season or whatever, which I've just never been like, I'm like, oh, it was calling for sun all day today, but here we are. It's a deluge. We're flooding now. Now we're at a flood warning. This morning, the weather app said that there was not going to be any rain at all, and now we're flooding, and that's what I'm used to. So it's just the idea of springtime lightning storms is just like, right, that's a thing that happens every spring.
Stormed the Doge's palace. But when they charged through the streets at dawn and started shouting, "Liberty! Death to the Doge!" nobody could hear them over the sound of thunder and pouring rain. And anybody who liked what these guys were selling weren't about to go running into a storm at 6 a.m. The West Group ran smack into a band of the Doge's guards and might have regrouped if not for some priests and painters on their way to work who took the initiative to waylay the conspirators a second time. Tiepolo's East Group had similar luck, gaining exactly 0 sympathetic rebels. In fact, Venetians were opening their windows specifically to shout insults, and not to be outdone, one kind old Signora Rossi heard the commotion while doing her morning chores, and when she opened her window, she dropped, or maybe threw, her stone mortar at the conspirators, landing square on the head of the standard bearer and killing him instantly.
Dang.
Tiepolo saw his comrade drop dead in front of him and took it as a sign that this was just not his morning, so he ran away and politely accepted his banishment. Meanwhile, old lady Rossi was hailed as a hero for her ingenuity and impeccable aim. As her reward, she simply asked to fly a Venetian flag on feast days and for her landlord to never raise the rent on her family home so long as the Republic endured. Now,
Dang, okay, lady.
this was a god-tier play, because Venice took the conspiracy as a hint to reform, to better avoid future treason, but also to improve the government's overall efficiency, which combined to give the Venetian Republic another 5 centuries of life.
Rent controlled from 500 years ago. Holy shit, you'd be paying pennies.
I mean, sure, Tiepolo and his conspirators made a series of fatal mistakes in their slapdash plot to kill a doge, but oh boy, if they only knew that Signora Rossi was waiting for them, those fools would have stayed the hell home. So, aside from some boring nerd morals about how murder isn't a cure-all, what have we learned today? Well, Mithradates should have been more careful with what he wished for in his poison immunity, so the rest of us should probably lay off the arsenic and stick to alcohol as our poison of choice. Meanwhile, Guy Fawkes is proof that the best laid plans are only as strong as your dumbest nickname.
Really
and finally, Divine Smite comes in many forms, and old Venetian ladies with stoneware is a good one to look out for. Thank you so much for watching. As I'm sure you could tell, this video was a blast to work on, so I've got to thank the patrons for voting for it. You guys are the real MVPs. Of course, history is long and people can be kind of morons sometimes, so there's no dearth of other hilarious failed plots. So leave a comment with your favorite and I may double back to cover some more of these stories in the future. You never know. Alright, see you in the next video.
Alright, great. That was failed assassinations. I was wrong about everything. I was completely incorrect. Because, I mean, I knew that I was like, I wondered if he would mention Rasputin, and he did. So I was right about that. But even though, like, because he did eventually die, I made that point. But yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that. Oh my goodness. That was okay. Thank you all so much for joining me. Excuse our technical difficulties. Hopefully we will be back to our regularly scheduled background very soon. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye.